Now stand by for the governor of Louisiana, Governor Bobby Jindal. Good morning to you, sir. Welcome to the Curvy Couch.
Well, thank you for having us this morning.
Well, things certainly changed as you have your book out, Leadership in Crisis, and we'll talk more about that later. But things certainly have changed for the Republicans in a matter of 2 years. If you are a Democrat, who do you blame?
Well, look, I'm amazed the House Democrats look like they're about to renominate Nancy Pelosi as their minority leader. From speaker to minority leader, it's almost like they didn't hear the message from 2 weeks ago. They didn't hear what the voters had to tell them. The voters are saying no to higher taxes, no to more spending, no to more borrowing. The reality is President Obama has led the country and led the party in a way they have not focused on the issues that Americans care the most about. The American people have said, we want to go back to work. We want our economy growing again. We don't want the government taking over health care. We don't want the government running car companies. We don't want the government running all these banks. And the reality is it almost looks like they're just doubling down. The Democrats are saying they're ignoring what the voters have tried to tell them. I think that's a huge mistake.
But one of the things could be because the blue dog Democrats, the conservative ones, lost. Well, so actually what we got is more separation between Republicans and Democrats and she has the votes because the Democrats that are left are more left-leaning.
That's exactly right. When you look in the House Democratic Conference now, you've got fewer pro-life Democrats, fewer Second Amendment Democrats, fewer Democrats that understand we need to cut taxes and grow the economy. But the American people, and it wasn't just Republican voters, independent voters, conservative Democratic voters, all said the same thing. We don't want more government spending and borrowing. Here's what I think Americans are very much worried about. We don't want to be the first generation that leaves fewer opportunities for our children and grandchildren than we inherited from our parents. You look at the deficits over $1 trillion a year. $14 trillion of accumulated debt. That's $45,000 for every American, projected to almost double to $26 trillion. We can't keep spending like this. And if they don't get that message, if you continue to have the president, Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, if they continue to think that the answer is more of our tax dollars going to Washington, more spending, more borrowing, I think 2 years from now, you're going to see another wave, another title election.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the taxes situation because you have the Bush tax rates, which have been in place for 8 years. Are they going to stay in place for those who make over $250,000? Hard to read the tea leaves if you look at yesterday, but compromise could be in the making. Listen to David Axelrod, followed by Senator Jim DeMint.
We have to extend these middle-class tax cuts. Absolutely have to do that. We should do that permanently. Give people the security of knowing that their taxes aren't going to go up. That'd be important for the middle class and important for the country. We cannot afford to go the additional step and permanently permanently cut taxes primarily for millionaires and billionaires at a cost of $700 billion for the next 10 years alone.
I hope we can get a permanent extension, but if the president wants to compromise on a 2 or 3 year extension, what's important here, Chris, is that businesses know what their tax rates are going to be over the next few years so they can plan growth and plan to add people. If we keep things in a state of flux, I'm afraid we're going to continue to have a jobs problem.
Governor?
Well, here's my concern. When you listen to Axelrod, you listen to the president, listen to the language they use. We can't afford to keep tax rates where they are. Let's be very clear. When you look at government spending as a percentage of the economy, it's been about 18 to 20% of GDP. Now it's close to 24%. It's going to go up to 26%. And they're telling us they can't afford to let us keep our money. We can't afford their spending. As I write in the book, and they're not going to like this, when tax rates go up, we've got less freedom. The more money we send to Washington, the less control we have over our own dollars, our own freedoms. And that's why I think there's just a fundamental. They don't get it. When they tell you they can't afford this,
no kidding.
This is our money.
But they obviously believe in their policies. But you said something interesting when you were listening to that you are not so sure the president is actually going to budge.
Well, look, I think they think that they're looking at this through a political lens. They're going to try to demagogue this issue. They're going to try to say, oh, the Republicans only care about the wealthy. And what they don't realize, though, and you heard the senator say this, the uncertainty is causing small businesses to sit and large businesses sit on a lot of capital. There are trillions of dollars of capital across this economy that are not being invested in part because of the uncertainty. And be clear, they're not talking about cutting taxes. We're talking about keeping tax rates where they are. Right. If they don't act, tax rates are going to go up. But the most important point, and this is what I think the election was about, and I think this is likely what the next 2 years will be fought about, is that we believe, conservatives believe, it is our money, that they don't need to be raising more taxes, borrowing more money. We've got a spending problem, not a revenue problem.
Right.
If anybody believes the answer is to spend more money, send more money to Washington, they haven't been paying attention. They're just going to spend more.
No kidding. Governor Jindal is sticking around to talk about his new book. More from the Curvy Couch and the governor in just a moment. And the BP oil rig explosion in May devastated the Gulf Coast and left residents out of work. In his brand new book, Leadership in Crisis, Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal discusses his interactions with the president and the struggles he had trying to help his state during the crisis. And the governor continues with us for a cable news exclusive. All right, Governor, very famously, that picture of the President of the United States, he flew into Louis Armstrong Airport there in New Orleans. He comes down the stairs of Air Force One. He reaches you. You say, hello, Mr. President. Then what does he say?
This is the first visit he's coming down ever since the oil spill. I would have thought for sure he'd be mad about the lack of boom, skimmers,
absolutely.
BP. He pulls me aside, and he's angry that we have sent a letter, a routine letter, a bureaucratic letter to the Department of Agriculture saying, there may be laid-off workers that may need food stamps. I was shocked.
Wait a minute. He flies in to talk about the BP spill, and when he meets with you initially on the steps of Air Force One, he's talking about food stamps?
And he's angry about that this may make them look bad. He says, now careful. And what's interesting is he clearly told some reporters in D.C., watch, I'm going to get mad at the governor, and watch, I'm going to chew him out. So we got calls from reporters afterwards. My response to him, look, if he had been mad about the spill or the damage being done or the lack of response, that would have been great. But this is a pattern with this administration. Right. They get focused on the wrong things, not just during the oil spill, during the economic recession. Instead of working to create jobs, what do? They take over the healthcare system.
So, Governor, you're saying at that moment when the president, you think that was pre-planned with the press?
Oh, absolutely. It was a complete press stunt. We got calls from multiple D.C. reporters saying, hey, we heard the president was mad at the governor. What were they talking about? And right there in that moment, you actually see me telling them, Mr. President, we're not mad at you about food stamps. We're mad there's not enough skimmers and boom, and there's no plan.
Right.
There's no plan from the federal government, so we put together our own plan with parish presidents. I didn't mind him being angry. I just wish he was angry about the right things.
No kidding. Okay, the second time he comes to visit, he complains that you're on TV too much, complaining?
At the end of a meeting with other parish presidents and other governors, he literally chews out me and Billy Nungesser, the Plaquemine parish president, saying, and I don't want to see you guys going on TV criticizing me, criticizing the president, which I thought was very odd because, again, they seem more worried about the perception than actually fighting the oil. That was the meeting where we had to tell them about the red tape. And let me remind you about the response, the federal response to this bill.
It stunk.
Oh, absolutely. This was the same federal government. They shut down vacuum barges because they wanted to count the number of life jackets and fire extinguishers on the boat. This is the same federal government. The boom and literally the skimmer sat on the dock for 48 hours over in Cocodrie while there was oil in the bay. We took the Coast Guard captain in the air to see it himself. They still couldn't deploy it. It still just sat there while the oil was coming in the wetlands. Right. It just seemed like they weren't angry about the right things.
No kidding. And that is the opening chapter in your book. The last chapter is called Now What? So you say, nice book, Bobby. Now what?
Well, and I talk about a grandchildren debt relief package. And here's the point. I think this election 2 weeks ago was about that same point. This administration has been focused on the wrong things. Why not amend our Constitution, require them to balance a budget? Why not amend our Constitution, take a supermajority vote before they try to raise our taxes? Amend the Constitution. Let's give the president the line item veto so we can get rid of earmarks.
You say make Congress a part-time job.
Absolutely. Look, we used to pay farmers not to raise crops, pay congressmen to stay at home. More damage gets done when they're in Washington, D.C.
No
and by
kidding.
the way, we've done all these things at the state level. We cut taxes, we cut spending, we balance our budget. Why can't Washington do the same thing?
No kidding. Well, they're watching right now. This is a great book. It's called Leadership and Crisis. Governor, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Terrific.